Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're about to dive into something that's, well, one of the most powerful forces shaping our world, but you can't even see it. We're not going to talk about it like some fuzzy feeling, though. No, we're going to treat it like a hard asset, something you'd find on society's balance sheet. Okay, so let's just jump right in with a huge question for you. What do you think is a society's most valuable asset? Seriously, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Is it money? Maybe all our fancy tech? What about our roads and bridges? Just think about it for a sec. Well, the answer, as it turns out, is something way more fundamental than any of that. It's trust. Yep, just trust. That basic good faith we have in each other, in our systems, in the future itself. It's the absolute bedrock. Everything else? It's all built right on top of it. So that's what we're talking about today, this invisible asset. But, how on earth do you measure something like trust? Well, that's what this explainer is all about. We're going to frame it as a type of capital. Think of it like an investment, an asset that you can either grow or, well, completely waste. All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty and define what we mean by trust capital. To really get it, we've got to go all the way back to the source. And that source, the very foundation, is something called spiritual capital. Now, what is that? Just think of it like the fountainhead, right? The deep well where all our moral characteristics come from. It's our beliefs, our shared values, the things that create good faith, give us a sense of purpose, and make us feel like we're stewards of something bigger. It's basically the raw material we need to even start building trust.
And you can actually see how this whole thing flows, kind of like a waterfall. It all starts with that spiritual capital we just talked about. That's the fountainhead, and it feeds right into social capital. And social capital, that's the value we get from all our connections, our networks, our communities. Then, both of those things support human capital. Our own individual skills and what we know. The key takeaway here is that without that foundation of trust, the other two types of capital they can't thrive.
Okay, so if we're going to keep thinking about trust as an asset, then we have to ask, what's the ROI, right? What are the dividends a society cashes in when its trust account is overflowing with good faith?
And the real-world impact is, well, it's just staggering. Some people have called the effects almost miraculous, and you can see why. When a community has these strong, productive connections, you see crime rates drop. More people show up to vote. Government corruption goes down. And get this, people are genuinely happier and even live longer. We're not talking about warm, fuzzy feelings here. These are cold, hard, measurable facts.
So here it is, all laid out like a proper ledger, a societal balance sheet, if you will. Look at the asset column. In a high-trust society, you get productive connections, people getting involved, and just collective well-being. But then you look at the liability side. A low-trust society, it's dealing with a social deficit, systemic corruption, and a total decline in civic life. I mean, the contrast couldn't be more stark. It really shows you what's at stake.
All right, so we've seen the good side. Now let's flip the ledger over and look at the liabilities. What happens when this precious capital starts to erode? What's the actual cost of corruption and decay when trust just vanishes? Well, let's take a look at a real-world case study. The United States. A lot of researchers point to a specific time, right after 1964, when you can see the threads of American social capital really start to fray. It was a whole mix of things, new technology, big economic changes, social upheaval that started to weaken those bonds.
And if you want a number to make this real, check this out. 40%. That's a 40% drop in people joining civic groups, things like the local Rotary Club or a bowling league over just 25 years. At the same time, people were having fewer friends over for dinner, they were going to church less. The very connective tissue holding society together was getting weaker.
Okay, so that's a modern example. But let's rewind the clock and look at a powerful historical one that shows how even institutions built on the most sacred kind of trust can completely decay. We're going to talk about these Islamic charitable foundations called waqfs.
In this timeline, wow, it tells such a fascinating and honestly a cautionary tale. So back in the 8th century, these waqfs pop up. Their assets were considered totally sacred. They were protected from taxes, they couldn't be seized, all because of religious belief. I mean, that's the ultimate trust mechanism, right? But, and this is the key, they had a fatal flaw. They were designed by law to last forever, with goals that could never be changed. Fast forward a few centuries, the world is a completely different place. And that inflexibility, it becomes a massive liability. The goals don't make sense anymore, and that opens the door for corruption, for decay from the inside out. They just couldn't adapt. And in the modern era, they got totally crushed by nimble, flexible corporations. It's an incredible lesson that even the deepest spiritual capital can completely crumble if it doesn't have room to evolve.
Okay, so we've looked at the good and the bad, the assets and the liabilities. What's the bottom line here? What's the big takeaway when it comes to trust?
I think it really boils down to this quote. The idea is that our social networks, our connections, have value, but not just for the people in them. The value radiates outwards. It creates these positive knock-on effects that benefit the entire community, even people you've never met. You know that saying, a rising tide lifts all boats? That's exactly what a high-trust society does.
And that really brings us full circle, back to that idea of a bank account. Because this invisible account of social capital, it's never standing still. It's always changing. Think about it. Every single interaction you have, every promise you keep or break, every time you choose to get involved or stay home, you're either making a deposit or you're making a withdrawal. So the question to leave you with is a really personal one. Right now, in your own life, are you making more deposits or more withdrawals?